Your parents bought a house on one income. You need two incomes and you still can't afford it. That's not a complaint. That's not nostalgia. That's mathematics. And the math is getting worse every single year. In 1970, if you had a steady job, a high school diploma, and showed up on time, you could buy a house. You could raise two kids. You could retire. You could take a vacation. You didn't need to think about any of this very hard. The math just worked. Today, someone with a college degree, dual income, and perfect credit can do all of those things, but barely, and they're stressed about it the entire time. This isn't a story about the poor getting poorer, though they are. This is a story about something quieter and more unsettling. It's about the slow-motion collapse of a bargain that built an entire civilization. And the strange part, almost nobody talks about it while it's happening. Let me set the scene first. We're going to talk about the American middle class, but understand this applies to most developed countries now. Canada, UK, Australia, Germany, the template is the same, the speeds differ. The story is identical. The middle class as a concept is weirdly hard to define. Politicians use it to mean basically anyone they're trying to win over. Economists have three different definitions. But there's a folk definition that everyone understands. It's people who are not rich, not broke, stable, secure, they own things, they plan for the future. In the 1950s through 1970s, that was about 65% of Americans, the supermajority, the assumed baseline of American life today. Depending on how you measure it, somewhere between 48 and 53% of Americans qualify as middle class. And here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. That number is shrinking, not slowly, but in real time. If you're under 35 right now, your odds of landing in a stable middle-class existence are genuinely worse than your parents' odds were. Not slightly worse, worse. But numbers don't stick with us. Numbers are abstract, so let me show you what this actually means with money. A typical middle-class household in 1980 needed something like this: a house. Call it $200,000 in today's money, a car, a second car maybe, a few weeks of vacation a year, groceries, insurance, kids' school stuff, saving for retirement, maybe some leisure. A middle-class household today needs the same things: same house, same lifestyle, same security, except that house. The median home price in 1980 was about $90,000. The median household income was about $25,000. That's a ratio of 3.6 to 1. You needed to save for 4 years of gross household income to buy a median house. Today, the median house price is about $420,000. The median household income is about $74,000. That's a ratio of 5.7 to 1. You need to save for almost 6 years of gross income to buy a median house. But wait, it's worse than that math suggests because of time. In 1980, you could get a 30-year mortgage with one income, one person's salary. A woman could stay home with kids, a man could work, and the pension at the end was a real thing. You got paid just for showing up for 30 years. Today, most mortgages still require two incomes. Both of you have to work, and pensions, those died in the 1990s. Now you get a 401k, which means you're gambling on the stock market for your retirement instead of receiving a guaranteed check. So the house costs 60% more in real terms. But you also can't do it on one income anymore, and you can't count on a pension. You need that second income to cover the house, which means both of you are working, which means childcare. Childcare in 1980 was probably your mother or your neighbor, maybe $30 a week. Today, daycare for one kid in most cities is between $1,500 and $2,000 a month. That's $18,000 to $24,000 a year. For one child, some families have two. So now your second income, the one you need to afford the house, is basically going directly to childcare. Your net gain from two incomes might be, realistically, $5,000 to $10,000 a year. That's what you're working for. That's the margin you're buying with 40-hour weeks. And we're not even at healthcare yet. In 1980, healthcare was a fraction of what it is now. A decent job came with decent insurance. Today, even with insurance, a serious illness can bankrupt you. A broken bone, an emergency surgery, a cancer diagnosis. These are financial extinction events for middle-class people now. They happen every single day. Education. In 1980, state schools cost something like $2,000 a year. A middle-class kid could work summer jobs, pay for college, graduate with maybe a few thousand in debt. Today, a state school costs between $20,000 and $30,000 a year. A private school costs $50,000 to $80,000. Students graduate with an average of $37,000 in debt. Some have 150, and here's the quiet cruelty of it. That debt doesn't go away. You can't declare bankruptcy on it. You can't escape it. It follows you for decades. It means you can't buy a house until you're in your 30s instead of your mid-20s. That's 10 fewer years of building equity. Car ownership hasn't changed much in real cost, but transportation is tighter. Gas, maintenance, insurance, everything is more expensive, and we haven't touched groceries yet or utilities. Or insurance premiums, which have tripled since the 80s. Or property taxes, which have skyrocketed in most places because home values went up. So when you add it all up, the baseline cost of being middle class, not comfortable, not wealthy, just baseline middle class, doing what your parents did, has risen something like 230 to 300% since 1980. Wages haven't done that, not close. Here's where this becomes almost surreal. Wage growth, when you adjust for inflation, has been basically flat for 4 decades. A middle-class worker in 1980 was making the equivalent of about $58,000 in today's money. A middle-class worker today is making about $70,000. That sounds like a raise. It's not. That's 40 years of work. That's Moore's Law happening in computers, smartphones, the internet getting invented, the global economy tripling in size, technology that would seem like magic to someone from 1980. And the middle-class worker got essentially nothing. Meanwhile, the cost of everything that matters, housing, education, healthcare, childcare, went up at rates 3 to 5 times faster than their paycheck. This is not a mistake. This is not an accident of the market. This is what happens when you have a structural problem nobody is legally obligated to solve. Here's the mechanism. Businesses want to maximize profit. That's just what they do. Labor is their biggest cost, so they push wages down or keep them flat. Inflation happens anyway because of monetary policy and other factors. So the real value of your paycheck shrinks, but you still need to exist. You still need that house. So you do what middle-class people have done for centuries. You take on debt, the credit card. The home equity line of credit, the second mortgage, student loans for the kids. You use debt to plug the gap between what you're earning and what things actually cost. And for a while, this works. For maybe 2 or 3 decades, it works. You feel stable, you have stuff, you go on vacation, you're technically middle class. Then something breaks, a job loss, a medical emergency, a recession. And suddenly you realize your stability was an optical illusion. You were never actually stable. You were just in debt, managing the debt, hoping nothing went wrong. And when it did, it went wrong fast. This is where the data gets uncomfortable. 50% of Americans now would struggle to cover a $400 emergency. $400. That's a car repair, a hospital cape, a furnace replacement. 50% of a developed nation cannot absorb a $400 shock without financial panic. Credit card debt in America is now approaching $2 trillion. People are not buying yachts. They're not investing in the market. They're paying for groceries and gas and medicine with credit cards because their paychecks don't cover it. They're making the minimum payment. The interest rate is 25%. The debt becomes inescapable. Bankruptcies have come roaring back. After a brief drop in the 2010s, personal bankruptcies are now approaching what they were during the 2008 financial crisis. And the thing that surprises people is that the median age of someone filing for bankruptcy is now around 55. These aren't kids with bad decisions. These are people who did everything right. Got the job, paid the bills, and at 55 they're financially ruined. Homelessness is up. Visible poverty is up. But more importantly, housing insecurity, the feeling that you might lose your home in the next year, is affecting nearly 20% of American renters now. 20%. 1 in 5 people living in an apartment thinks they might be homeless next year. Here's the thing that makes it invisible. These people have jobs, good jobs, decent jobs, they're teachers. They're nurses, they're IT workers, they're not unemployed. The system is working exactly as designed. It's just designed to make middle-class life unsustainable on a middle-class salary. Now let's think about what this actually means. The middle class wasn't just an economic category. It was a stability mechanism. It was social glue. When most people owned their home, had a pension, and believed their kids would do better than they did, society was stable. Crime was lower, trust was higher. People invested in their communities because they planned to be there in 20 years. When the middle class is confident and stable, democracy works better. When it's panicked and desperate, it doesn't. This is not speculative. This is happening right now. Political polarization is correlated with economic anxiety. People who felt secure voted for stability. People who feel precarious vote for disruption. They don't necessarily understand why. They just know something is broken, and something is broken. It's just not something that can be fixed with the normal political moves. You can't vote your way out of mathematical reality. If housing costs 5.7 times your annual income instead of 3.6, voting doesn't change that. Policy might, serious policy, but not the kind we typically see. The danger is that when you have a massive population that did everything right and still failed, and they understand it's systematic, you have the ingredients for something ugly. They'll start asking questions, and when they look for answers, the only people offering them are usually the ones who benefit from chaos. So here's what we know: the middle class is disappearing. Not because people are lazy, not because of some individual failure, but because the costs of a middle-class life have tripled while salaries have stayed the same for 40 years. It's a mathematical certainty. You can't sustain that. Where does it go? That's the question. Some of it slides down into precarity. People who thought they were middle class, realizing they're one emergency away from being poor. Some of it slides up into the professional class, people who can afford debt, who have family money, who can wait out the chaos. But the stable middle, the floor is gone, and the weirdest part, the people managing this system, the politicians, the business leaders, the economists, they don't seem to have a plan. They have spreadsheets, they have quarterly earnings reports, they have stock prices, but they don't have a plan for what happens when 50% of your population realizes they're on a sinking ship. Maybe they think it will just continue. Maybe they think people will adjust. Maybe they think this is fine. But history suggests that when you hollow out the middle class, everything else that depends on it gets pretty unstable. The question isn't whether this is happening. The question is what happens when enough people realize it.